Meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Flags in the back right corner.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everybody, a reminder to have your microphones turned on. Roll call, please.
Trustee Foley,
Here.
trustee Lappin.
Here.
Clerk Palovich here, treasurer Ellery Summers. Here. Trustee Kroll,
Here.
trustee Reiner.
Here.
Supervisor Skibby.
Here. Moving forward, is there any amendments, changes, or corrections to the agenda as presented? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved.
We have a motion on the table. Is there support?
Support.
Been moved and supported. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the agenda signify by saying aye. Oppose the same. Agenda has been adopted. This is the first opportunity for public comment. This is a pretty short agenda. If you have public comment, Open Meetings Act now, this only stipulates just your name. We do not need an address. If you stand at the podium, just please state your name and also then just limit yourself to 3 minutes. If we have more comments, we can potentially always come back. So this is the first opportunity for public comment. If there's any public comment in person, podium's there. If there's any public comment online, please use the bottom taskbar to allow us to identify you so we can address your comment. Seeing no public comment in person or online, we'll continue to move into the purpose of the meeting. First item of business is fire department, new hire. Chief. Take a look.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mark Hanson, Township Fire Chief. Just want to thank everybody for convening today. We had our personnel committee met up with a candidate, Mr. Ed Hoskinson. The committee found that candidate to be very adequately will do the job for us very nicely. References have been checked, amazing references. And it's my recommendation at this time that we put on Mr. Hoskinson as a full-time position.
We have a recommendation from Chief Hansen to move forward with the hiring of Mr. Hoskinson.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion on the table to move forward with the recommendation. Is there support? Support. It's been moved and supported. Further discussion? Yes, trustee Reiner.
Is this a full-time hire?
That would be a full-time hire, yeah.
And so where are we at with?
That'll bring us up to 5 of the
up to-
necessary
up to
6.
5 from
Yep.
down to 4.
And I have another one waiting in the wings. As soon as we can pull a personnel committee together that would like to interview for position. Actually, I have 2 that are wanting to interview. So that would put us up to our adequate staffing, try to avoid overtime and different things like that. Would get these guys on a normal schedule finally. And that would be a big help.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I was part of the committee that interviewed Mr. Hoskinson. Seems like he'll be a good fit, very well qualified individual.
Yep.
As
Comes
an
with
engineer.
high regard and references. Senior master sergeant at the base where he worked said he'd take 100 of them. So
If there's no further discussion, we have a motion on the table to move forward with the recommendation of hire of Mr. Hoskinson. Roll call, please.
Clerk Palovich, yes. Treasurer Ellery Summers. Yes. Trustee Kroll,
Yes.
trustee Reiner.
Yes.
Trustee Foley,
Yes.
trustee Lappin,
Yes.
supervisor Skibby.
Yes. Moving forward, is for fire department are just some workshop dates. These are just kind of opening the vein of conversation of all things fire department related. I believe it was also asked to bring a schedule. I just look, I'll always make myself available at any time that the board wants to have these discussions. But I look to the board to and their calendars to.
So are we looking to have them in the evening?
I would say
during the day?
evening affords the greatest amount of participation of our public. If they want to interact, I would say 6 p.m., 7 p.m. afford the greatest amount of flexibility. That would be outside of that. Dates are upon everybody's schedule. So Are there any, I mean, obviously, we're already knocking on September.
Right.
So, and our regularly scheduled meeting in September, I believe, is on the 22nd. 26th, I do apologize. Is on the 26th.
Yes, sir.
So are there, I know trustee Lappin, you're gonna be
I will be-
on a road trip. So
I
I,
don't remember if Cash, I don't remember if you suggested that we basically wait until October.
Yeah, well, I just know that I have 5 days for sure that I cannot do anything on in September, so. 6th, 7th, 14th, 15th, 16th,
Our bad days.
Those are Tuesday. Well, that's a Tuesday.
Tuesday, Wednesday.
Tuesday,
and
Wednesday.
Following Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
What about the following week?
That's open.
well, then.
South Bay,
something that we're
South
gonna
Bay
do-
meeting here on the
Anything
20th.
after 5 will work.
So do we want to do 6 o'clock on the 20th?
we already
20th
have a
is
meeting.
the
20th,
South
we
Bay
yeah, we
event
have
here.
a South Bay public input session on that Tuesday.
Wednesday, the 21st?
That'll work.
So Wednesday, the 21st, 6 PM or 7 PM works for the board?
6.
6 PM on the
5.
6, 5. Okay, September
So what time?
21st, 6 PM. We'll put together a Zoom.
Just like board meeting?
It is not a board meeting, it is a workshop.
So
We're not gonna be
Steve
making, he can participate.
Yeah, I can participate. I was gonna look at, if it's at 6 o'clock, it'll work a lot better than it's
Yeah.
8 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, West Coast time.
Got some time zone issues.
Yep,
So are we just planning on one or?
let's have that conversation. We can, upon the conclusion of that discussion, we can pick subsequent dates.
So
So
that's,
we-
that's at 7 or 6 PM?
6
Sorry.
PM,
Okay, good.
September 21st,
Okay.
6 PM, Fire Department Workshop. It is a Wednesday. Okay. Everybody have that down. We'll create the Zoom. We'll send it to you. That way you have more than one opportunity to participate. We can start having conversations. Okay, and does that conclude? Anybody have any additional questions about the workshop date?
Nope.
Seeing none. Move forward into the water rate discussion.
Like to thank the board for their time.
Yes, thank you very
Thank you.
much, Chief. Okay, so obviously, I think the reason that the majority of the people are here this evening, and once, also thank you for your attendance. Wish we had people at our meetings, every meeting. So water rate discussion. Obviously, the board looked at our revenue and our expenditure reports, and knowing what we have for the issues that we've had with service lines and what is on the horizon as it continues, we had to look at what our revenue streams were. Because our revenue streams are falling behind our expenditures. And if you've ever run a business, that is not a good side to be on. And so I want to give some educational components because there's a lot of unfortunate misinformation. And difference in facts. So here tonight, I think is the best way that we can really formulate this would be to look at what our internal mechanisms are, because it was not meant to be an inference that because our municipal partner increased their rates that we had to base it upon that. We don't need to actually talk about that really at all. Our biggest issue is our service line breaks. It's been systemic for the past year. This has been an ongoing conversation at the table. And unfortunately, it's just continues to exacerbate. So let me continue by saying that as this progressively popped up, we've taken note. We've actually already hired. We have an engineering firm doing a study, and we've already been in the process of our request from the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. That pool of money, we're still waiting on the final determination, is looking at October as a potential disbursement or acknowledgement of receipt of our program. That program includes, out of the $15.8 million ask, $13.1 million of that 15.8 are to replace 2,600 service lines. That is roughly every single service that's in the township. And that is where we have water loss. Another component of the enterprise business, because it's separate than our tax collection and our general fund. Another aspect that I'd ask consideration to, and one that was not reported on, is our percentage of water loss. We have 5 principal master meters in the township that track volumes of water from the city, our producer of water. When we get to our end user, whether that's a residence, a business, et cetera, we have 38% water loss in our system. So if you take that full pie of that, we're getting a bill from those 5 master meters that bring water into the township from the city. And you take that 100% and you reduce it by 38%. There's a lot of water that we have to pay for that's not getting to the end consumer. These are not scheduled dates. These are not part of bigger projects that correlate to our CIP, our capital improvement program. These are, as it stands, and it has been for going on 14 to 16 months, chasing our tail with the blue poly CTS that is pretty much every single service line in the township was put in within a 4-year window and is seemingly all deciding to fail in a very similar window where we have a dire issue. We've identified it, like I said, over a year ago. We have hopefully a master funding mechanism being put in place here yet this fall, that we can then have a controlled budgetary volume of what we have to spend on. Because right now we have before us just excavation costs, and we can make, this is all public. We can get you any copies of anything you request, because our purpose here is expressing the reason that our system needs to have an increase. None of those monies are internal, like some of the comments may say. This money is going right back from the enterprise back into the enterprise infrastructure. But between the fact of 38% loss and the fact that we cannot have routine scheduling because we don't have the revenue to, on our own, afford massive line replacement that we need, we've already taken the corrective steps and got a loan in place. Alpena, the township, has also gotten the designation through this process thus far. It sounds like a backhanded statement, but we are considered a disadvantaged community. Now, that part of being considered a disadvantaged community through the state drinking water state revolving fund affords us a term of an additional 10 years, up to 40 years for loan for repayment at a locked-in APR of 1.875%. That number can only go down, cannot increase as terms of the APR. But in the meantime, state and federal monies take time to get off the ground. So we're still looking at 2023 before, once we get identified and know what our true funding source is. Another tie to that disadvantaged community is the debt forgiveness aspect of that. We've seen on a 5-year rolling average of other municipalities that have utilized the drinking water state revolving fund, a debt forgiveness of anywhere from 5 to 45% of total ask. So those are later determinations as they get closer. But our biggest water loss in the Charter Township of Alpena are individual service lines, and they have been for over a year. And if probably not even longer than that. So we are effectively trying to make whole a system that when it was implemented, I don't know the rationale behind the determination of the materials used. I would have to guesstimate that it was sheerly looked at as a cost savings. And here we are, roughly 77 to 81 is our principal infrastructure expansion. And 40 years later, that blue poly is what's kind of biting us in the rear, to put it in just blunt terms. And so here we find ourselves. How do we provide water? Because it's it's inevitable, unfortunately, like everything else in today's society, costs have gone. We've seen on average anywhere from labor costs that are looking at an uptick of over 5% coming into this year. Materials costs anywhere from 15 to 30% increase. And it just continues to grow. The one thing that unfortunately, I think in a historic vantage point, our community's always given high praise to low water rates. That's a false sense of security, I think, from an infrastructure standpoint. Because the issue with infrastructure is it's not a problem until you go to turn your water on or flush a toilet. And when either of those functions don't work, that's the only time it is a problem, until you deal with it on a daily basis. We're dealing with it on a daily basis. We never really want to have any additional increases other than what we have to. But when we are looking at a mechanism that puts us over our operations and maintenance budget, to the tune, I think we're roughly 600, yeah, $587,000. And these are digs and costs for service lines. These are not mains. These are lines that go to your home or your neighbor's home. And unfortunately, we have a rough aggregate average per dig for a service line replacement of $10,000. And so I just wanted everybody to be cognizant of that, because those are some of the moving targets. We've also been giving consideration, part of the drinking water state revolving fund process is an internal process that will have to be done and for auditing purposes and accounting purposes, and that is separating out our enterprise fund. Our enterprise fund has historically and to date been a singular fund. With new financial reporting expectations, that fund needs to be broken out between water and sewer. So we're going to be going through that process. And one part of a topic to make our services more palatable to our end consumers has been, at least in conversation, and I do not speak for the board on this topic, but we've given open conversation to what does it look like moving forward in terms of our quarterly bill. I know personally, I've been trying to strive towards a system very similar to that, that the city implements in terms of a ready to serve charge and actually charging people for what they use. But even when we do that, if that is a consideration of this board downstream, we've also give some comparables to what that would look like if we went that way. This is an opportunity. I mean, I want open conversation. You want answers. I just want to give you the facts that we have, because part of this conversation, and rightfully so, as noted, is the disparity between what we charge and then what we pay. That's a topic in line, but out of context, if you will. It's because we still have pending litigation. And so I don't want to go off on that rail. But it is a valid concern. We do have the means to take care of, once those data sets are taken care of, to rectify that in one foul swoop. As it stands currently, that is out of this board's hands. So I don't want to get too far in the conversation that is touching into the litigation or those talks. We have been currently, Trustee Lappin and myself have been engaged in conversations with members of city council and their management, talking about the water authority and how to look at our community and what is in the best interest of our community as a whole, and putting a fair amount of light on the impetus of the importance of the infrastructure, because that's really what's been hurt for the past few decades, is putting as much money back into the infrastructure as this board really actually has been doing for the past 5 years. I don't want to be the only person speaking. There are 6 other trustees. I want to afford every member of this board an opportunity to address concerns. And I want you as our bosses to tell us your thoughts, and if we need to improve communication or what we can get you for an educational component to really understand why a water rate is needed, an increase is needed. And it has nothing, truly in this instance, has nothing to do with the city. Our infrastructure in the township is really what we have to focus on, because I can't look at either of you and say, you know, we're gonna curb our expenditures, because we can't reasonably do so, because our expenditures are tied directly to independent service lines. And that would be like one of us looking at you and saying, don't have money to fix your line, you're gonna have to go weeks without water. That's not doable either. So when you have a ratio that's out of sorts in terms of revenue and expenditure, if you can't curb the expenditures, you have to increase revenue. And that's what this board did effectively. Effective October 1 would be a 6% increase. And it is sheerly that discussion and that percentage increase is because our infrastructure needs it. We have actually, just to give frame in the fact of how tight it's been and how out of sorts it is getting, we've actually, and Michelle has figures. Do you just want to talk about our expenditures that general fund has overlapped? And
Well, right now, the general fund for the water fund to pay its bills, had to borrow 176,000 from the general fund to pay bills. We're also 65,000 short for paying this month's bill, that we might have to borrow money from the general fund to pay F&B for
the overage of the
the
O&M.
overages.
An exacerbating part of this, and frustrating as well, is we have contractors that do a lot of work, and we have upwards of 5-month delay on invoicing. So there's other factors, you know, when you're working with private businesses and local contractors that do good work. We had a scenario where their billing agent was out due to a health concern. And so we're still getting caught up on the bills being submitted. So seeing how out of sorts it was, that's why this board decided to move forward with utilization of engineering and going after the drinking water state revolving fund monies. As it was last scored, we were in a fundable position. The last things that we're waiting on that allocation is what is the potential debt forgiveness? And what is the total funding in terms of final scoring and placement? We were scored 24th out of, I believe, over 600 applicants, which is a funded position. But these are real concerns that we've had to face. And we're asking our residents, our end users, to share in that cost, because by paying those rates, that's what keeps our infrastructure whole. I wish these were some projects where we could set aside, and we have set aside other larger projects in the meantime, because service line breaks are your source of water. And if we don't have those established, then we're not serving our community to the best.
I just want to point out too, that the M32 water tower run a leak last winter.
Yep.
So now that has major repairs. It's gonna be over 300,000
Okay.
that we are using ARPA funds for.
Yeah.
So that's not affecting the rate.
No.
Could you explain our proposal to the folks?
Gonna say.
Yeah, so the American Rescue Plan Act, otherwise known, ARPA, well, I won't get into any other acronyms, are part of a secondary CARES Act methodology for disbursement of federal funds to state, county, and local municipalities. We scored in terms of the ARPA or the SLFRF funds, $919,211.02. Oh, 917,368.28 change. So we received that. And now we're looking at, especially with our infrastructure, as any municipality that has infrastructures, how do you best spend that money? And we've been, and like I said, if any of these documents that we discussed tonight that you want copies of, please let us know. We'll get you everything you need. But we're already taking, as Michelle stated, these are things that were on our capital improvement plan to be solely funded out of enterprise. And that's how bad our service line break issue has become, is that we're now, instead of pushing out certain projects, we have to push out because we don't have the revenue streams to accomplish them, because we have such a consistent service line break issue happening, that we have to, one, in the intern, increase our rates to offset. And once again, we're not working with 100% of the pie, unfortunately, until we take care of our service lines, over 2,600 of which we're hoping that by tackling this issue, our 38% water loss is reduced to what an infrastructure of our age and our size, just so that you kind of have a little reference point. We should roughly be around, in a perfect world, 10% loss. And that's even brand new systems have loss. Any distribution system has loss. We should not have 38% loss. So we're only bringing back, we're paying 100%, and we're only really being able to bill at 60%, because this is a lot of unmetered loss. So I open it again. And yes, trustee.
Can you tell the people, us, how many, approximately how many of the 2,600 service lines have been repaired, to give people a sort of a vantage point of where we stand?
Yeah, just well, from an economic, without not knowing the exact number of just service lines, the packet that we have before us, I would say year to date, out of the 2,653 services, we've probably replaced, out of those, we're probably at about 75 to 100
Pretty small.
in the past 18 months. And so we are in a bad spot, because one, and the state is, and there's a lot of issues going on. How do we, the conversation post Flint looks completely different landscape. I was reading through the American Wastewater Association, that since 1980 up to 2018, water utility costs have risen 110%. And that's just as a statewide average. They went up 350% in Flint. And so the last thing that we're going to be doing is making ill-informed decisions that put your health and welfare. We're not in that same situation. We have one production plant, we have one treatment. But we also don't want to be having your internal systems, because a lot of water breaks, a lot of residents don't know that they even have a water break until it breaks the surface of the ground, or they have a drop in water pressure. So the ones that we do address are definitely lost, because I identify them as such, because they're either breaking ground, there's a complete pressure loss in a residence or building. The vast majority of those seeping water leaks, you may have a slight downturn of pressure. You may have a little bit more sediment carry in your internal plumbing system, but you may never know that you have a decrease in pressure. You may never know unless you see one part of your lawn that's growing exceptionally lush. And unfortunately, that is where we find ourselves. We find ourselves in a very similar topic in many different veins here at the township. And I don't think that we're rare as a municipality, because the days of kicking cans down the road, it isn't in the best interest of our community. And it's definitely not in the best interest of our infrastructure. So we're obviously extremely cognizant. I got an earful from two residents that gave birth to me that are on our infrastructure. And so I am empathetic, but we're doing everything in our power. We've already put the bigger chip in play, and that's addressing this in one foul swoop, and then having a known stretched out 40-year payment instead of having to pay sporadic logistics costs to go identify and fix one issue at a time. May not be the best answer, but that's where we find ourselves. We have a significant amount of loss. We don't have the revenue, where our expenditures are going upside down. And that's unfortunate because we have delays in billing and invoicing. We've tried to address that with those providers. We see the problem for what it is, and the most consistent way to move forward is what we've already started and put in play, and that's the utilization of the drinking water state revolving fund dollars. That 15.8, as I mentioned, 13.1 of $15.8 million is for this exact concern. This concern that reflects in your end bill, that's everybody's concern. So that is what we're facing. This is not meant to infuriate our partners in this process. We have a good conversation going. Because that may also be something that our community desperately needs is more partnerships. But there again, I afford this table to trustees because Trustee Reiner.
Well, Mr. Chairman, you've set the ground rules tighter than I want them to be. So as an independent trustee, my wife tells me I'm a bull in a china shop sometimes. I would prefer to be looked at as Jesus turning over the tables in the temple, but whatever. Not talking about the fact that part of our public statement in regard to having a rate change for our citizens was a raise in the rates from the city. I feel I have to talk about that. I feel I have to touch on that because I started getting calls about it, and then I hear that it's going to be reported upon that we aren't paying any rate increases to the city since I've been given
2019.
2019.
2017.
Yeah. So they've increased their rates. Let's face it, we have to raise rates, and I acknowledge that. All the reasons you gave are valid and necessary reasons for raising rates. But I voted for a 6% rate increase based on our rates, not on the city's rate to us, because I felt that in addition to all those costs that we're having with these water line breaks, that we also were going to have to pay the city an increased amount. So having found out that's not the case, I request that we consider what should our rate be for our citizens for these costs. If it's 6%, so be it. But I don't want anybody to be misinformed by that. The other thing is, well, let me go off that subject for a second. We have a rate that we have to charge to support our system and pay the city. They have a rate that they think should be what I would call a retail rate that we should pay, but that makes no sense. And almost everybody realizes that makes no sense. So only, and I hope I'm not messing things up for you here, you guys on the negotiating committee.
If I feel that you're
Yeah,
about to
kick me.
cross a threshold.
Yeah, kiss me. But I will tell you that I think there's only a few people in this whole county that feels that the township should pay a retail rate to the city. And most of those are in the city. But in any event.
Let's stay on task, so.
Yeah, well, whatever, no. I think there's a message to be delivered here since we're here.
and we had a wholesale rate set. I mean, let's face it, we have a system too that has to be maintained and has to be taken care of. And we are not like someone that just has their own line from the curb stop to their home or their business. We have a whole system, both sewer and water out there. So clearly, that's appropriate that we pay a lower rate to them for what then we distribute to our citizens. And it's a benefit to them. I mean, let's face it, the city gets a benefit of additional customers because we have a system in place. So, you know, I just wanted to clarify that one from my point of view. This is all from my point of view. Well, back to the first point, we have to recognize that for the same reasons we have increased costs and we have increased need for rate increases, so does the city. So when I find out that not only are we not paying any percentage rate increase on the rate that was set to the city, what was the rate increase? 2.08%. 2.08%. So, you know, my question then is, should we be paying 2.8% additional on the rate that we're now paying them? Should we do that to act in good faith and to try to also keep up or not get ourselves into big people hole? I submit that that's one thing we should consider, or at least we should set it aside. If that, I know at one point that was being done, but I also learned from a board member who thought that's the way it was being done, that it's not being done. And as you said, we're seeking funding to try to do a one and done on these problems, but it's going to take a while. So we're going to have to pay the piper in between when that funding comes in, if it comes in. And now, because we're of that 600 or almost 600,000 that Michelle just mentioned a few minutes ago, I believe that the budget for that line item was $250,000.
$350,000.
I thought it was 250, but yeah.
It is under that contract. We as a board made corrective action 1 year ago when all these conversations were happening. So I would implore that everybody reads their packets. We increased, but that's part of where Mr. Fahey's statement came in of. As soon as we have that, we have the means to make it whole. That's been our position from day one. So.
So anyway, I guess what I would made the recommendation, I think we should either pay the percentage increase, or I know there's arguments and legal arguments to be made about, well, they have to provide us certain data to justify the cost. Well, you know, we know what our costs are. So I don't know if I would really want to get into that, but if that needs to be done, get it done. But there's a couple other things that have come to light this week that I want to touch on too. Well, I guess without trying to talk too much about litigation, I think there's a message here to be given to the folks at the city. I really regret that it was put out that we owe $18 million. We all know that's not right. Not even close to right. But I also don't want us to have to put out a water and sewer increase to our citizens and not have some means of addressing that there will be an increase we have to pay someday, now or someday. And so right now, I think we're spending it all on these water lines, and we're not planning for that. And I want to make sure we are. So to be fiscally responsible, I want to make sure. But I think that number being thrown out there was regrettable, and I just think it was inappropriate. I'm not on the negotiation team with the city, but I think we're at a point where I talked a minute ago about, there's economic benefit to both of us working together and joining our systems together, perhaps. We've been talking, could you tell people what AWASA means? Alpena Water and Sewer
Authority.
Authority, okay. That's what we've been trying to head for, but we've been banging our heads against the wall in that negotiation, as I understand it. I'm not part of it. I don't know much about it.
So
I think we need to
trustee
be,
Reiner, I would express very sensitivity walking down the path that you're currently.
Okay, well,
Because you, as you mentioned, there are some complexities. Obviously, when you look at two different municipalities that not only have nearly a decade-long litigation, but you see internal memos back and forth since the agreement started.
let me just finish with this then. There's also a time when it costs too much to try to do it. And I know our negotiators I guess what I'd like to say is, I think we need to set a deadline for our team, or look at other options, because people are saying this is going nowhere, and we need to be cognizant of that. One other thing, one or two. Part of what's come to me this week is that we charge a minimum usage rate, and I know that, and I understand why, but what I'm hearing is the impact on who that impacts when we have a minimum usage rate. So I think part of what we should be doing in the next very short months is looking at whether or not we should continue to impose that, how much it would cost the rest of the ratepayers if we do away with that. I don't know how many people are on that minimum usage rates that don't use that much water. Okay, but I think we should study that. We probably can get a number from F&V fairly quickly and see whether we should change that. Now, I recognize that means more of that burden will fall on people, but at least it's fair. Everybody pays for what they use. So I'd like to see us address that, put that on the agenda down the road. So
As I touched on in conversation, those have been conversations ongoing. At least 2 years, if from my seat, 5. And how is it, because we actually looked, just to try to actually take everything instead of trying to compare an apple to an orange, which unfortunately did and exacerbated a divide our community doesn't need. When you look at how that's set up versus our rate, because there's 2 ways to bill in water utility. You have a ready to serve charge, that of which the municipality and the city does, or a minimum usage bill that we've inherited. And so that is the argument, especially for, as we know, our median age in Alpena County, I believe, is 68, if not 69. How do you look at it appropriately? And going to trustee Reiner, that's been, I think we've been batting that around in conversation of what would it look like to go away from a quarterly bill into monthly bills? Because I've also heard that quarterly bills are difficult for some residents to really plan for. And so what does that look like? There's a lot of variables that we can bring forward and show what those costs would be. Monthly, we know that obviously you're going to increase your internal mechanism costs 3-fold because you have 3 times the mailings. So there's some things, but a ready to serve charge with usage as usage has been a conversation for some time. And I think that's something that moving forward, we'll have to give a little bit more onus to.
obviously, if OWASA becomes a reality, then that, whether it be a ready to serve or a minimum usage, will be applied across the board. You wouldn't be able to have both systems. And so one will outweigh the other somewhere along the line.
well, I know that's
Yeah,
what my friend Billy Yaney would say is if dog rabbit, but but we're not there yet.
We're not, we're not. I don't know when we'll get there, don't know if we'll get there, but we continue to do what this board and the city council has asked us to do, and hopefully it will be fruitful.
Yeah, so this is atypical, because if you have or a question or a comment, obviously this is public comment. We usually don't have interaction. But if anybody wants to go to the podium, just so that we can get your name for the minutes to be accurate.
We've moved on.
I still feel that this, is there, well, Ms. Komar, before you, is there any other comments? I mean, topics that we need to discuss? We can always come back under discussion and finalize.
Yeah, the public comment may raise some questions.
So public
Yeah.
comment may, Ms. Komar.
Could you clarify, minimum use and ready to use? Is the ready to use like I only get charged for what I use?
So, yeah, I can give a quick little synopsis of a breakout. So in our bill, what you see is, water and sewer are two different rates. Currently, they're at, 1057, 1,000 gallons, and 1106, 1,000 gallons of sewer. So a ready to serve charge in our neighboring municipality has, if you have a service to your home, you can say, I'm going, as many of our residents do, say, I'm going to Florida, Arizona for 4 months. You have your water turned off, and either municipality can be turned off at the curb stop. With us, since it's completely turned off, we lose all revenue for those 4 months because there is no usage. Now, with the difference, that's for 7,000 gallon minimum usage. Ready to serve charge, you only get billed for what you consume. That is true, based on water rates. But there's a lot of those similarities. You know, if you're gonna mention our additional fees, then let's talk about the additional fees to actually talk about apples to apples. The ready to serve fee breaks it out, water and sewer, and all, in this instance, any other additional charges. You will get that bill for those every month, or at least one time if it's a quarter. You would get that bill, let's say fictitiously, it's $100 flat fee. You have to still pay that because your property has access to water. Use it or not, you have a baseline. So your revenue stream stays somewhat consistent.
That's ready to use.
That's ready to use, but you don't get billed for your water consumption because you have none. But no matter, even if you're gone for those months, you have a fee that is associated with the property because that property has immediate access to water. In our instance, we have a 7,000, because it's based on, I believe, 2.5 people living in a residence, which is the state average. And at that average, the methodology is that 7,000 gallons would be a typical 2.5 person resident usage. That's how that calculation came to be. Unless you have it turned off, you will always get billed that, whether you use 7,000 gallons or not. But if you have your water service turned off for those months where you're in a warmer climate, you don't get any bill
But,
on our end. But yes,
but there's
please,
a $50 fee
well,
to.
turn off and turn on.
Turn it off. And a
One time.
$50 fee when you get back to turn it back on.
So for the homeowner, it seems like the ready to use charge would be the best.
And that's
one.
the conversation that we've already been having. How do we make costs are gonna be what they are, unfortunately. We've had, hopefully post the last 2 years, we'll find a plateau in some new reality. But we have materials, one, if we can get them. Two, we're seeing over 30% increase in cost. And so, to your point, the difference between a ready to serve charge is you have a base fee because you have the ability to have water and sewer to that premise. That is how it's broken up. We are by a minimum usage bill, and that, as it currently stands, is at 7,000 gallons. So the conversation is, how do we regulate by either switching methodologies to have at least more of a consistent revenue stream? Because that revenue, we do have a fair amount of residents that leave. And so if we lose 5% of our end consumers to warmer weather, 10%, that doesn't help our balance sheet either, because there's no consistency.
So you said if the ready to use, there would be a basic fee, but then you said nobody would be charged just for the turn.
That's
off and
how
turn-
that system is broken up. You have your base fees, whatever they may be.
Is it
infiltrate-
monthly or
Uh,
tri-monthly?
Well, right now, the city's on a quarterly basis as well.
So my water's turned off, how much do they pay or would we pay for?
That would be determined by going through the process and figuring out. I wouldn't know what are ready, if we were to change tomorrow. We have not done the calculations.
Yeah, we're discussing two problems here.
Right.
One, how to repair and one,
Yeah,
the rate. So
Yeah.
just, I really wanted to comment on the other one. But just as we look at our community research, we're a retirement community. Many of us live alone, don't use a lot of water. And if we don't use it, you don't buy it from the city, right?
that would be one way to skin that cat.
Okay, all right.
It's a little bit.
I have a
Except for,
solution.
except for our 38% loss due to surface line.
I have
I-
a great
I'll-
solution for your repair. For your sewer line repair.
It's not sewer, service line.
I'm sorry, sir. I just had a drain field put in. Anyway. For your water service line repair, I have a wonderful solution. It is so simple. When we had water brought south, right?
Yep.
Marie Twite, supervisor at the time, tried to get money, grants, anything from anywhere. She even went to Washington DC, right? Times have changed, luckily. So we, property owners, for each lot, had to pay out of pocket $14,000 just to go buy our house, not including hookup. $14,000 we had to pay to get our citywide. We had no choice. We could keep our wells, but we still had to pay the $14,000. Well, not too many people could afford that. So they tacked it onto the taxes of those property owners. Do that. $10,000 per water line, you said it would cost to repair it. Take each of those water lines and charge them $10,000 to fix it, to go buy their house and put it on their taxes if they don't want to pay it. Just like they did for us. Don't make us pay for their fixing it. We paid dearly and are still paying dearly.
I don't disagree. That payment and that extension of water main gave you a better service than the water that was coming out of your wells too, which increased your
well.
property values. And then, so that's part of a special assessment and a bond process. And there were some complexities, obviously, because inherently the township through tax tribunal lost some of the properties opposite of the lake because they were basically invalidated to show any vast improvement.
You had to increase the value.
The
of
increase, yeah.
of the property commensurate with the cost.
So special assessments are always on the table.
Yeah, some people had to sell and leave, they couldn't afford it before the tax thing was figured out. So that is my solution. And God bless you all, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gilmore.
Good to see you, man.
Like I said, atypical. I want to have an open format in regards to this because
I understand that everything's falling apart and it takes money to fix it. A lot of it,
your name, ma'am.
Judy Goujon, a lot of it's falling apart in our neighborhood. But going back on back bills, back in October 12th of 21, the rates increased by 5%. April 1st of 22, rates increased by 5%. That's 10%. Now you want to go another 6%. It's a lot. When the people in the city, we're paying double what the people in the city. I don't, it's hard to grasp it.
And it's a tough one because infrastructure, you don't know it's a problem until it's a problem. We're looking at any and all, whether it's grant, loan, any mechanisms. And nowadays, especially at 1.875%, where we're currently poised with the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund is about as free of money as you can get nowadays. And so we're not close just putting solely the burden back on our end consumers. It's how do we find other mechanisms to make it more palatable? Because unfortunately, rates will continue to go up. And so I think the conversation being is, how do we look at our methodology? Is that a way to make it more palatable? And like I said, unfortunately, we're cleaning up, this board is actively been cleaning up 30, 40 years of not putting the energies and efforts back into it. It's a sad reality, but it's one that this board has been facing since 2016. And so how do we get the best control over that? We've identified the principal issue. We've have incrementally gone through increases, but we also know that that is only sustainable to a cap, which we're probably getting close to, given the consideration of our median income in the township. So how do you do it? We've already identified it. We have the principal project in a position that looks to be funded. There's some nuances in the details of, like I said, the debt forgiveness is the biggest contingent of that. But we have a project that looks to be costing in one foul swoop, $13.1 million. And that addresses, all the problems that we hope with service lines, because it will address every service line. Yeah, there's no principal good answer. And we're not rare as a municipality that does transmission of water and sewer services. I spent most of the day today looking at examples through American AWWA, it's the Wastewater Association. It's not just wastewater, but Waterworks Association. And just within the state of Michigan, the rates of increase are going up. And there's no solution without federal and state dollars to start looking at infrastructure issues. That's a conversation. We've already positioned, we have identified, we've poised ourselves in an excellent position to be funded. And that is through the good work and efforts of the company in which the township hired, Fleiss and Vandenbrink, and their engineering firm that wrote that intent to apply. So well, that, like I said, I think there was over 660 applicants for that pool of money. And we were 24. That's a good thing for our community and for our citizenry and for the rates going forward. Because right now, it's hard to get a grasp of what our economics are, because we have moments where we have 2 breaks a day in ill weather. So to get a hold of it and find solid, understandable economics and drivers, by having a 40-year term, you can at least schedule and budget accordingly. Because right now we're running around fixing lines because every end user deserves to have water. Now, if these were projects that we could postpone for years and let some equilibrium happen, that would have been a given. But these aren't projects that we can just push off. This would be a project where you would have to look to the person next to you and as your neighbor and say, at least I have water, because that's not a good way to look at it. And so we want to give the services that our water and sewer customers deserve at a reasonable price. And right now, pricing is so out of whack. doing everything in our power, in our finding tools that weren't ever historically in our toolbox to address this very issue. Ms. Gomar, you have a second? Yep, to the podium. Yep. Oh,
My question is, do you not know which lines need replacing until they break?
so here's a simple way, I think I forecasted it earlier. Our infrastructure was implemented between 77 and 81. Nearly 100% of those service lines that were put in, unless the homeowner site specifically asked for copper going from the curb stop into the home, all of those service lines are of the same material.
What is it?
It's a blue poly CTS line, which shortly after its inception and placement in the ground, unfortunately, there was a massive recall. And then there was also a lawsuit against the manufacturer that our forefathers, so to speak, never hopped on. No rhyme, no reason. Mr. McKenzie, yes, sir.
Scott McKenzie, I just had I guess I'm a numbers guy. So we're talking, $500,000-600,000 in repairs that you've done in infrastructure. Give us the numbers that we paid you this year in water. Give us the number that you paid the city in water. Let us differentiate how much you actually capitally took in as gross dollars. You can tell me you spent 400,000. Did you take in 4 million? Did you take in 2 million? That doesn't tell us anything. As a businessman, it's the end dollar. Okay, so we are paying you X amount of dollars. How much that does it? Put it this way. What is your quarterly income from us? What is your quarterly expenditure if you pay it to the city? Whether you're paying it or not, I don't know if you're paying it. The other question I have is you have a 38% loss. As you know, I ran for your position. I never will again, not here for that purpose. I did the research. In 2016, it was 38% loss. I have the documentation to prove it. That just didn't happen this year or the year before. That loss has been there for years and years and years, right? If you're charging him $7,000 worth of water, and her and him, how many thousands of gallons are we paying you for that we are not using that takes off of that 38%? That's the numbers we'd like to see. You can throw all the numbers you want at us. Give us real numbers. All you're giving us is what it costs you. What are you getting? If you're getting $2 million a year and you spent 400 infrastructure, where's the other 1.6 million going? It's a simple question.
No, you bring a good point. I actually now I want to extrapolate how many customers out of the 2,600 are below 7,000 gallons. That would be a good way to.
But we also just had,
They gotta go. up
And
to the
maybe-
podium.
Yeah. Yes, please go to the podium. State your name for the record, please. Yeah.
I believe we just had a little bit of this knowledge of.
Mr. McKenzie.
Do you know what our water revenue is off, just roughly?
I have no idea off the top of my head.
I,
would have
it
to go to
seemed-
revenue and expenditure.
it seems to me, we just,
I don't have them in front of me. For the revenue and expenditure.
We,
I
are
think
you-
it was somewhere around, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm just trying to.
Where I have the report.
I'll grab it.
Running
I
through
just-
it.
Okay, but from a water only standpoint. Dawn just ran some of those numbers. And why is like 1.7 million sticking in my head?
that's what it was.
Okay.
Profit. No, not ours.
No,
That's
We're-
revenue, not profit.
Yeah,
yeah, that
Revenue.
would just be the raw that would be the gross revenue.
combined.
Then, of course, was it combined?
Yeah, that was
Okay.
combined.
Okay. I wasn't sure if there was if that number that this person that retired is looking at the individual sewer, and then the individual water. I just can't remember it because it was a few days ago.
$2.7 million in gross revenue per month.
Well, that's what,
But that was a combined.
that's,
that
I
may
think,
be-
combined sewer too.
Water
Yeah.
sales.
So, well, we have a lady at the podium. So yes, ma'am.
Sue Wagner. I have kind of a unique deal going because I have two water bills that I have. One for my house, which I don't have any problem with because it's fairly accurate and use maybe 8,000 to 9,000 gallons a quarter. But then across the street, we have a garage. And that was hooked up 15, 16 years ago. We had a little garden back there and our little granddaughter would go over there and it was just easier if we put a bathroom in the garage. So somebody didn't have to grab her and run across the road with her when she had to go to the bathroom. So now it's up to 7,000 gallons for the minimum. And month after month after month after month, my usage over there is zero. So I'm paying for 7,000 gallons of water and sewer. And even if we do use the water at this point, since she's grown up now and gone away, and we don't have the garden anymore, the only water we use is if I wash my car a couple times a quarter, and that's it. Sometimes if my son's over there, he might run in and go to the bathroom and flush the toilet once, but that's a lot of water and sewer for the usage that we're doing. So I was just hoping maybe even if you came down a little bit on the amount, I know I appreciate that the water is there, but 7,000 gallons when I'm probably not it takes months and months and months before I show 1,000 gallons on a bill. So there are, I mean, the lady's right. We don't all use 7,000. And that one, what I pay at the house, I use, so I don't mind that one, but that one's kind of a waste of money and I hate to shut it off because it is still viable. Although anything extra, if we have something to do, we go over there and use that water, so we don't have to add it to the house water.
Thank you very much for your comments, ma'am.
I do.
Yeah, okay.
The revenue year to date, this report was printed on the 25th. The water revenue is $1,172,590.34. Our expenditures year to date is $1,256,270.38.
What was the revenue again?
$1,172,590.34. So we are at a loss of $83,680.04, which does not include the $65,000 we still owe in this month's expenses. So.
Any board members outside of?
Let the
trustee
people
Rathman?
know what the fiscal year is that we pay.
Our fiscal, yeah.
It's
that-
April 1st.
April 1st to March 31st. Then we also have a contract for services for our operator, Fleiss and Vandenbrink. That contract is in August to August, August to September, which tends to skew some numbers because it doesn't correlate directly to our fiscal. But nonetheless, those costs are only growing.
It should be August to July, so the end of July. August 1 to
We
July
actually go
31.
through July, I mean, through August, and they start over with their.
Oh,
expenses.
September 1 to
September
August
1,
31.
Yeah.
Inverse order. But if by all means, if you have questions, if there's something that we have not identified or you want us to look into even more so. Yes, sir.
Terry Gujan. I just wanted to bring up the fact that there seems to be, at least in my area, a handful of digs for service line repair or replacement that have been dug up, buried up, water left running, days later come back, they're redug. Why does it take 2 digs to bring excavators back twice? It's got to be costing a fortune.
And Mr. Gujan, to that, I'd have to look into that site specific case. I take it was your residents that had,
No. Arizona and Colorado Road area.
okay,
There's been 3 or 4 of them.
We've nearly completed the entire loop of Colorado, I think, with line replacement. That's,
Haven't made mine yet.
well, and hopefully, so I can't really answer that because I don't know if what the mobilization process was for that dig. I'd have to, if you give me addresses, I can look into it and call you downstream and let you know what happened. I don't know.
Well, I'd say I'm just curious to know because it's gotta be costing quite a bit.
Well, and what's
to dig
really
it
costing
and then
us
come
there
back and dig it again
is the fact
because it
that
hasn't been repaired.
we're chasing these breaks singularly. We can't budget chasing our tail singularly to fix these breaks. We need to do it with the economies of scale and look at entire neighborhoods and change them out as one. Because then we know we have a known cost per line, we have a known payment schedule, we have variables that are a greater known than just a call from a residence. I've lost water. I see a geyser coming out of my neighbor's front yard. That's what we're doing right now. And it rightfully so, because we need to restore those services for the greater good of our end user. But in terms of sheer economics, we've already, like I said, for a year, I've already started putting mechanisms in place to take care of the principal issue in one foul swoop. So to that site specific, I don't have an answer for
No,
you.
I understand that, but I just don't understand why it takes a repeated dig. Why, if it's not dug up and repaired and then sealed up, and that's it.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Isn't it true that we're fixing the immediate problem, sir? And that's why we're seeking funding to do it all at once. It'll be painful when we do it all at once because a whole bunch of roads dug up, right? But I remember when the city had all of the streets dug up in the city for a while for whatever they were doing back then in the 80s, I think it was. But it will be better than digging up your road today and then next week digging it up again at the other end for somebody else's line failure. And so that's what we're doing. And though each one of those is more costly than if we did the whole street, the whole neighborhood all at once. But we haven't got the funding to do that, right?
Yeah.
Does that help?
Hinkley, Arizona, yeah. We have neighborhoods that are,
Well,
some are worse than others.
I think what you're saying
What I'm
is
saying is.
they came to fix one
they
thing.
fixed one that was leaking, dug it up. Covered it up, left it running for some reason, came back again days later.
Mhm.
On the
dig
same
it up
one?
again on the same.
So,
line.
Right.
so
So
That's
they're
what I was
basically
following.
spending- yeah, this is
Yeah.
not
it wasn't
one.
DPW. It was whoever one of the contractors was had some other obligation that they probably had to do as well, but yeah, it's hard to say why.
I would,
contractor
I
comes with
actually
us.
have to look into dig reports and let you know what complexities or what the issue was to give you a fair answer, sir. I can't.
Seems like a costly way to go and bring. data.
Well,
You know,
and when you see,
back points.
when you see the page after page of our costs for sporadic digs, because these breaks are sporadic. At least when they show themselves. Weather conditions usually exacerbate it, freeze and thaw, and the winter months are usually the busiest, if you want to say the busy season for line breaks. It is, because you have the most water transfer in our upper layers of soil. Most of our fill, if you live anywhere south of the river, and probably from Sunset School all the way through Worth, all the way to 23 South, is all slag fill from Abitibi and the cement plant historically. So when you have chunks of metal interfering with, unfortunately, a poly-based CTS service line, if in that freeze thaw, you have ingots almost of steel that are wearing through. I wish I had the exact issue of why they had to dig it, fix, it, put it back together and come back 2 days later. I don't know. I don't know if they did our end because the township by our ordinance, our responsibility is water main. That connection from the water main is called a corporation valve, that port, which is then transferred to the right of way of the road. Usually that's FYI, if you live in a neighborhood on infrastructure, which most of you do, if you see a fire hydrants are always on the side of the main as a good rule of thumb. So if you live on the opposite side of a hydrant, your line, that service line goes from the main underneath the road to a tube in your yard. It's called a curb stop box. That is how we operate, turning on and off water service. The responsibility of the township for our ordinance is to that point, outside of the meter solely in the home. And so it could have been an issue where we fixed the service lead, buried it, homeowner still didn't have pressure. That homeowner's line from the curb stop into the home may have been where the issue was.
Is that going to be the homeowner's responsibility?
It always has been, and it always will be, unless we look at the total cost of having and changing our ordinance into your personal home. But as it stands by ordinance and our construction standards, and very similar throughout the state, is the responsibilities from the main to the curb stop. That curb stop, the line that goes from the curb stop into the home, is the homeowner's responsibility. And at least since the implementation of our infrastructure, it has always been.
So what happens if you get this loan from drinking water?
Same thing.
To replace.
If the homeowners
It's only gonna
just to the
replace-
curb stop,
to the curb
what we will offer is, obviously by economies of scale, if the homeowner wants to take the responsibility since everything's been mobilized. It would also make the most sense if you have a faulty product and you know it's faulty, to take that opportunity while we have crews there and have it finished all the way to the home, but that would be at your cost.
Good to know.
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. and we have a new caller, Ms. Milner.
Jim Nuttall. I've got a question in regards to what, you're talking about the litigation between the city and the township. And what the figures that you just gave for the amount that we pay for water. Have we paid that to the city, that amount that you're talking about that would have been billed? The bill that you're talking about,
That was our revenue and
That
our
was our
expenditure.
total
in
revenue
terms-
that we.
right, but you said you had expenditures of
And part
over,
of those expenditures included some money paid to the city.
some paid to the city. How much of that was paid to the
Well,
city?
I have, I mean, you can do the whole thing, but
Okay,
I just
all right,
figured it
all
out
right.
quarterly.
That's okay, it's okay.
No, just to throw out some
The
numbers.
problem that we have as the public is we get two different stories, two different figures. It comes out in paper, comes out on the news. We need to know what the data is from here. Would you have that accessible to the public in regards to how much we pay for our sewer and water separated out? Okay. Per household. Okay, don't we have commercial customers, industrial customers?
Yes,
How are they billed?
same way.
Okay. But they use.
They have different meter
Their-
sizes.
Their volume is vastly more
Should
than
be.
what, okay, all right.
By
Now,
volume.
when you're talking about these service lines, you're assuming, I'm guessing, that all of the loss is through these service lines. Am I correct?
It's a fairly validated assumption
Okay, and how do you validate it?
by our master meter location. You
I
can
understand that, but the master meter doesn't tell you where the leakage is. Because what we have in our neighborhood. Our lines, our main water lines. Are asbestos,
AC, asbestos concrete, yes.
excuse me. Okay, when's the last time you've had to deal with asbestos
On a
in
break.
drinking water?
So I think we're trying to take an agitating word of asbestos. And so asbestos, as long as it's wet and you know it, this was standard.
You have water
material.
flowing through at great pressure.
Yeah.
Okay,
60 pound on
And you
average,
have
50,
and
52
you
to
have
60 pounds.
chlorine. Not a good mixture. So when we're talking about the service lines, we're talking about minimal amount as opposed to the actual main.
By all, it's definitely
Okay.
relative. yes.
Have you done any investigation in regards to the mains? If
We're
there's
in,
issues
we've
with the
actually just
mains.
had our asset management plan kick off. We're having everything for the first time, probably potentially ever in our infrastructure.
Okay,
Put in.
all right. Last question. With the amount that you're going to supposedly get, this is a loan, is my understanding,
That
has
is.
to be paid back. That increases our fees again, correct?
That would be a conversation. Well, Mr. Meadow, I wasn't done.
I'm listening.
You would like an answer.
I would like to,
We don't know what that answer is, because hopefully this stopgap measure will take us to our hopefully second quarter. The last conversation was looking at second, if not third quarter of 2023 to start.
okay, but
So-
you're looking at $13 million.
40
Have-
years, 1.87.
Have you done any paperwork in regards to what this is gonna cost each resident?
Still doing it. It's
Could
obviously.
you provide that to us, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
And Mr. Meadow, a lot of the requests that you've made, you can come here any day of the week and we can provide.
I'm requesting that if if you have that available, I would like it. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Gomar.
So, good point, good questions. I have a question. And I know you don't want to talk about the litigation, but I guess we are a little bit. Way back. When we started buying water from the city. We paid so much and then they wanted to increase it. And there is a dispute. I believe that litigation is what it's all about right now, right? That they are saying that we're supposed to pay retail, and what is it called that we do pay?
We pay a rate that we've confirmed through litigation in 2018 with their rate expert and our rate expert that solidified the known data points of 2017. This board took proactive stance instead of staying at a 2014 rate to obviously pay off the principal. It's business. You know that the township has an onus to pay and make whole the city. As soon as we had those data points, we actually, as a board, increased our disbursement to the city to that 2017 rate. That was the last time that we've had those data points and able to confirm and increase our payment.
So is there a name for that versus retail? Wholesale. Thank you. All right. So we're paying the city for wholesale rates, right?
And we're going, I would wish that you could form the direction because I don't know where you're going, Ms. Tomar.
Well, I'm going with way back when the city increased the rates and the township disputed it and they kept their payment to the city the same without the increase, but they charged us citizens for the increase and put it in escrow somewhere in case they lost the litigation. Where is that money? And has it been paid to the city?
So, simple answer, simple question. The escrow fund is roughly $3.6 million. It's still held in a joint operated account with the city. Until we have a judge's permission for disbursement, that's exactly where it sits.
So all that money we have been paying is sitting there doing nothing. Okay. Is it gaining interest?
A little bit.
How much is your savings account getting you?
As much as I can get, wherever I can put it.
0.001%?
So, okay. Now my next comment, well, I'm up here. Anyway, several years ago, I read somewhere that water is the new oil.
Blue gold.
Yeah. So we have a bay out here, and we're not like my son in California, who if I go there, I'm gonna have to bring my own water. Okay, I mean, we're pretty blessed. If you read the news this last week, how many beaches were closed because of bacteria in the water, it's sickening. Now, here's something I want you to think about to address to the city. Back in the 80s, there was a water sewer separation in the city, reference, all its streets were dug up. They separated the street runoff from the sewers.
Storm sewers.
Storm
drain.
system.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Sewer, storm system separation. Well, now we know all the pollution that comes from cars and wheels and all the stuff that goes into the storm sewers. We probably shouldn't have done that because now we're polluting. And I learned recently, and you can verify this, and you may already know about it, that some of the sewer separation lines were done by an independent contractor. And they inadvertently put the sewer line into the stormwater system. Just like we don't know which water lines are going to break out there until we investigate. There are sewer lines going directly into the bay, and they don't know which ones. That is a problem. We are drinking it.
Well, I can also say that this board is actually in the discussion of taking and looking at least entertaining what's called the Lake Huron Forever Pledge. And one of those is an educational component to actually deal with stormwater runoff and actually natural ways of purification.
Sounds
Side
good.
note.
Go fast.
Well, and that's inherently what we've been doing for the past 6 years is fixing decades of kicking the can. We hate to have to do this, but when our infrastructure has a need, we're not against turning over any rock to look at what potentials or what conversations are there to be had. What we know is what we know. And right now, if we've already taken very advanced proactive steps, we're doing everything that we can, but we wanted tonight to be here to answer any questions, to clarify bad math or whatever the case may be that has, depending on a source, which way you're at. We're here. If there's documents that you want to see, let us know. We have no issue with that. What our concern is how to get our water and sewer customers a clean, good product at an affordable rate. That's always been our mission. This is the unfortunate reality where if it were mains, we could have that discussion. But we have 3 different principal types of mains, and we have asbestos concrete, we have ductile iron, and then we have HDPE, which is a high density polyethylene. Those are the 3 principal materials that our mains are made of. We have mains, unfortunately, outside of the 13.1 of the 15.8. We have 4-inch mains that are grossly undersized in the neighborhood just south of here. We have capacity and some looping projects that round out that 15.8. But $13.1 million, because we're looking at, and actually the newest figure from engineering, per linear foot for any service main project is at $280 to $300 a linear foot for that project. And so we're not opposed to, I'm not opposed to looking at grants or any other mechanisms that don't put the burden on you, our residents. Anything that I can find and go for, or this board can do. That's why we're in these positions. These aren't for salaries. This raise is for the infrastructure. our infrastructure is what's unfortunately been not considered or looked at for a very long time. And so there's no clean way of getting out of it besides finding the most palatable, controllable means of a mass cleanup of all those service lines. Because chasing our tail at $10,000 a pop to be in one neighborhood one day and come back 3 days later and be four doors down from where you were is literally just that, chasing our tail in an economically non-viable way. Again, the floor is open. If there's comments by this board, we're all ears. You know? I wish there was a magical rock that we could all rub and make our infrastructure perfect. We have a long ways to go. And this is an issue that inherently we take over as a board, but this is decades in the making. This didn't start in 2016. This didn't start last year. This was having an enterprise system run really almost into the ground. So we may have had a good fund balance in the enterprise, but we had water loss out of our ears. And so how do we get to common ground? I think when I say that the approach with the utilization of the drinking water revolving fund is the most palatable, can we break out what those potentials would be? There's some variables to that, Mr. Meadow, that I don't even think our engineering firm could entertain just yet, because the state Eagle has not described what level of debt forgiveness is going to be associated with disadvantaged communities. That will be huge. Yeah, I mean, is it going to be 50% written off? That we won't know that until hopefully October-ish. But I don't know of any other means to find a funding mechanism to address this issue. So, yes.
Here's what I'm requesting. I came prepared to file a motion tonight to either set aside or modify our rate increase request for this go around. As was pointed out, you know, we've had, this is the third one in whatever the period of time is, it's fairly short. But here's what I guess I would like first, so that we can make better judgment of what our needs are. We threw out a number, we had a range, and I think you had the numbers in there, and I don't know if I still have that in my file or not, but of how much each rate that was proposed would generate. So I think what we need to do is take this and compare it to and work on this a little bit with what our projected costs will be for this next year, based on what we've experienced over the last 12 months at least. And then put this on the agenda for the next meeting as to whether or not we want to modify our rate increase. I also really want to know, Mr. Supervisor, what we're going to do about the city's rate increase. And so I'd like that report at that meeting as well. That can be at our next regular meeting. As far as
I
I'm
guess
concerned.
I need clarification on your question. Like, what do you mean, what are we gonna do about the city's rate?
Well,
You're talking about disbursement to the city?
right.
Yeah. Then I'll make an appointment with you so that we can have that conversation with Mr. Fahey. That'll be probably the quickest way to get to that answer.
All right.
Again, Ms. Comer. If anybody has any additional questions, if you would write them down on a slip of paper and hand them to Mary.
I've got a pass here. So I have a couple of different questions. Number one, what material are you using to replace the old water lines?
K copper,
Copper?
K copper.
What's K copper?
It's an industry standard for wall thickness. It's It's a thicker out inside wall thickness diameter.
Is there
It's a-
any,
I forget the delineation of copper. I'm not a plumber.
Bigger and better.
It's for exterior underground principal use. It can take. Yeah, the wall thickness is the biggest. There's some other homeowners that have smaller wind because you're usually typically insulated, et cetera, et cetera.
so they've gone away from plastic?
So to answer this, K copper is what we're replacing from the main. This is how it was spec'd out. And the intent to apply through the drinking water revolving fund was copper lines from the main to the curb stop. All copper. It lasts.
Okay, so, from Maine to curb, okay.
So then K copper, a limiting factor with K copper from a municipal, excuse me, from a municipal standpoint, is that it comes in one of two determinations of overall length, 60 foot or 100 foot. So we also have, we never want to have splices in line, which unfortunately, that used to be the way fixes were done. You got a water break. It's gonna take two broken pieces of line and put a coupler on it. Problem solved, cents on the dollar. Till you actually have to fix the problem. And you can't remove it because you have 4 couplers that have been spliced in a line. Of which we've seen.
So it doesn't react to chlorine,
What
the
does
K copper.
K
doesn't-
copper? Yeah, in terms of environmental, I mean, I know, so everything reacts to chlorine. But that comes down into stagnation and holding time. So typically in a residential service, depending on where you're at, the vast majority of our infrastructure is on a looped system. That meaning that there's no dead ends. So depending on where you're at, our 2 biggest dead ends obviously are 23 South at Tim Drive. And then 32 West out to CRTC, the airport. We have flushing mechanisms by contract. CRTC has to utilize 50,000 gallons a day because you have 4.6 miles of 12-inch ductile main that is acting as a water tower underground. So you want to get away from stagnation. So chlorine can obviously, there's a lot of chemicals that can have a detrimental effect, not at the rate that it's applied at our provider.
So 23 South I didn't know about this asbestos in the old water mains. I'm curious. I don't know.
As an environmentalist, I would ask that you actually look into it. And then if you think that it's that much of a health concern, I will make myself available for that conversation.
So you don't know if it affects us south.
If it affects you.
I mean, are the water mains that are used
the
with
water
this
mains
going
from
south?
23 North, I do believe, are all HDPE. Because that water main extension is the newest in our entire infrastructure. And I believe that was put in roughly 2001. And so ductile and AC pipe, I don't think was the most cost effective or how it was engineered or designed. And so that is all HDPE. main.
Going north?
South.
Oh,
You were talking about 23 south.
so you
I
said
think you said
south,
that.
going north.
I apologize. Right.
So you meant going
I
south?
meant south. That is, yeah, out of our principal infrastructure, that is the newest piece. We could obviously also look at smaller projects as in the conveyance of Trowbridge Estates off of Golf Course Road. That was a small site condo development that infrastructure was conveyed, and then the same with Wyndham Gardens was also conveyed to the township. But as a principle, that is the newest larger expansion of infrastructure was 23 South, and that took place from the intersection right at North Partridge Point all the way just south of Tim Drive to the 9,000 block of US 23 South. To that very last hydrant.
Okay, thank you. So the other question on the 38% loss of water. I want to just clarify. You said, how do we know it's 38% loss? Because you have 5 monitors, right? Coming from which the city feeds in. This is what I understand. So correct me if I'm understanding incorrectly. So the city water feeds into these 5 meters that then feed into the township water lines, correct?
That is correct.
Have those meters been checked for calibration?
I appreciate the question, Ms. Komar. Actually, all 5 principal meters were replaced 3 years ago, 4 years, 3. Within our term, all 5 master meters were replaced to the tune of $45,000.
Is that since Applebee's been here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 2 years.
So it was in the last.
I was gonna say, it's
It was
been
like
relatively soon.
Yeah,
So 2 years ago, you said?
2, yeah, maybe. Right.
Was,
3.
did you notice a change, an improvement or a change in accuracy?
Well, the biggest thing is with the, obviously accuracy, these are accurate to, I think, 100th or 1,000th of a, I mean, they're extremely accurate, but then what they also do is in main and macro water transmission is depending on water hammer and back pressure, water can flow backwards. These meters actually read both ways. So what we had for decades, red water coming into our system, but when that is pressurized and back feeds, we never had the ability to know what that is. Now we do.
So the regurgitation of water, are we paying twice?
Not anymore.
No,
Yeah, I
you
didn't-
get credit for it when
Yeah.
it goes bad.
Not
There's
anymore.
a
It's like
crafty
running
word.
your car in reverse back in the day when we had that type of odometer.
So, now, looking at those 5 meters, I mean, how many of us have gotten appliances that the motherboard failed? I mean, I would check again. I mean, it's just like 38%.
They check,
They do?
yeah,
Alright.
and then they concurrently check them for the principal reads, our staff and the city's staff. That's, they go together and read the meters.
So if, say, meter number 2 feeds into, say, Colorado Avenue and all that, can you tell if more is going to Colorado Avenue and more is going to meter number coming
So
through?
it's not as, you can't just say that this meter only takes care, I mean, to a large extent, it takes care of whatever infrastructures beyond that point. But now, can we separate streets past that meter? We'd have to look at every single meter, add that up, reduce it from the principal on the master meter to find.
So, but you could find one of those meters and get an idea of where the 38%, which meter is registering the waste or the loss of 38%, right?
We just have to look at trending. It tells what a volume passed through. And then if we look at that zone, we have 3 principal zones that we read in terms of our quarterly bills.
Mhm.
Some of those zones overlap. They aren't site specific to meters 1, 2, or 3. Some of them might be fed through 2 different meters to get into that neighborhood. So to try to infrastructures, you would have to come and sit with me and I would show you our infrastructure to kind of really grasp.
I think it's all right.
I've taken trustees out because I used to work in DPW. So let me show you what I know, which isn't much. But I know enough to be dangerous when it comes to water.
Mhm.
And we have an issue and we're taking as many corrective actions.
Mhm.
So in principle and in theory, could you really do the math and take out of our 4,000 plus end consumers? Can you say that meter 1 serviced A through H and meter,
You can't.
we know what total volumes pass through and
Right.
it's very accurate.
And if your baseline, if you don't have a baseline, that doesn't help you anyways, because maybe they are all leaking in there and it's been going on for a decade, so. How far do you go back?
Yeah,
You know.
so what we have done, we did put a fair amount in terms of those master, we did replace those. They have a 10-year warranty. And I think they have to be calibrated by state standards, either every 3 or 5 years to check on calibration.
Mhm.
So they are. We have good scientific instrumentation rather than a roll of duct tape and a tube. That's kind of what it was, for a
So
bad analogy.
one last thing, I want to thank you for all your work and your proactivity on this. Think about my suggestion, the solution.
I thought you were gonna say flex steel tape. But that many linear feet. No. Are there, I mean, tonight is, if you have questions, we want to clarify and tell you, we have some additional information. We can get to Mr. Meadow and Mr. McKenzie. But ask us questions. That's the only way that we can engage you and have a conversation. The last thing I think we ever want to do is put more burden on our residents than you can bear. But quality of life is a direct component to water. And it's a principal thing that we should all consider as our probably, besides heat and electricity, our most principal utilitarian need. But times change as well. I know I'm glad I only have internet through Charter. Because if I had phone and TV, I'd probably be north of $300 a month just to have those services. It's not a justification, it's just an example of how utilities got so out of whack. And the problem with that we're seeing is that by taking a proactive stance, we're finding decades of issues that were never addressed appropriately. Yes, trustee Paul.
This FNB is probably one of the better organizations that this township has hired to take care of anything that we've ever had taken care of. They've actually saved you money because they are very involved in being proactive. And I don't think any citizen has been without water for probably more than a day or a couple of days. Look at some of these people are up for months. So they're being very proactive and taking care of all the past. They're bringing it up and bringing it to this board and saying, this is what you've got. This is what you need to do to make sure that these folks have their water. And I think they're doing an awesome job. Are we paying for this? Yes, but the service, their knowledge and what they have to support what they're doing is unbelievable. They're doing a great job for this community.
And I think the timing is just terrible all the way around with all the economic pressures that we're all experiencing in our own budgets at home due to supply shortages I mean, you can go from the top to the bottom. There's shortages everywhere or costs increase and it's all coming together at one time. Unfortunately, we're paying for some of the sins of the past. I mean, there's neglected infrastructure or, back then we had a faulty pipe that was put in that there was no retribution on that. So now we're sitting here 40 years later and we're like, what do we do? Well, there's nowhere to go. And it's just like your budgets are. I mean, we can't do anything without money either. It's terrible. And I think it's just the timing. Everything is coming together at once. So we're stuck in this situation with it. I don't know what else we can do other than we try and fix things and move forward with it. I don't know where else you go with it.
Yeah, it didn't happen overnight. It's not going to be fixed overnight, but we're not turning our back on it. And we're making sound decisions that will be for the betterment of you and our infrastructure, because if these were, as I mentioned, if this was a project of an over expenditure for a project that we didn't budget accordingly, I wholeheartedly, we'd be pushing that out. These are your neighbors, and we're not in the business of saying you can't have water until our books are good. And so how do we continue to provide the services that are expected? So we have a series of corrective actions, one of which was a rate increase. But even more important than that is hopefully a mechanism that secures funding to address the sole issue. And then we can start looking at how to actually maintain and do scheduled improvements rather than having to take and replace all principal infrastructure as a point of connection to residences, businesses, et cetera. We can't turn our back on a single customer, really. So, yes, trustee.
I'd like to thank all you folks for coming tonight. It's a pleasure to see you here. Please come see us more often and bring your voices with you. Sometimes we look out here, there's nobody sitting, and we're conducting business. We're doing it for you folks. Hopefully we're doing it right. We're trying our best. But thank you so much for coming tonight, bringing your. We appreciate it.
But there is, if anybody has, you can always contact, call direct into the office. I'll make appointments, meet you on site. I do what I can. And if there's something that the township can explore, I think part of the conversation that we're hearing is maybe we need to put a little bit more effort into what does it look like to change our billing scenario? What does the ready to serve charge look like in the township? And have some options as a potential of what that would look like and have that conversation. I can only speak for myself. There's 7 people that sit at this table. But that has been one thing that we've been talking about for a period of time. If there's any last comments, please stand at the podium. Seeing none. I also thank you for your attendance this evening. Please show up more regularly. Call me, hold us accountable. That's what we're here for. So I appreciate that. Is there any further discussion for the good of the board? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion.
We have a motion on the table to adjourn. Is there support? Support. It's been moved and supported. Further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Meeting adjourned at 7:23.